Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Public Utilities for the City of Santa Rosa to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Chair Galvin.
Here.
Vice Chair Arnone. Board Member Badenfort.
Here.
Board Member Badenfort.
Here.
Board Member Grable. Board Member Walsh.
Here.
Board Member Watts.
Here.
Oh. Are we not hearing any sound from our Zoom participants? One moment, please. We're having some technical difficulties. One moment, please. Sorry about that. Okay, let's try that one more time. Roll call. Chair Galvin.
Here.
Vice Chair Arnone. Board Member Badenfort.
Here.
Board Member Grable. Board Member Walsh.
Here.
Board Member Watts.
Here.
Board Member Wright.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your patience. Reminder to board members to please mute your phones and microphones when you're not speaking. Also to put away your cell phones and personal computers. Next item on the agenda is statement of abstentions by board members. Do we have any? Very good. We have no study session. Next item is item 4.1. We'll now take public comments on the minutes approval. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
We have no public comments.
Thank you. The minutes from May 5th meeting will be entered. We'll now move to item 5.1, first staff briefing. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Our first staff briefing, item 5.1, is the 21-22 Capital Improvement Project update. And Jason Roberts, supervising engineer with our Capital Improvement Projects team, will be presenting.
Thank you, Director Burke. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Chair Galvin, members of the board. My name is Jason Roberts, supervising engineer with Capital Projects Engineering, and I'll be providing you a brief update on our 2021-2022 water CIP construction. Next slide, please. So I'll start by summarizing construction projects that were completed in calendar year 2021 and so far in 2022. I'll highlight a number of those construction projects that have been completed. I'll then summarize projects that are currently in construction and scheduled to be completed this year, as well as a couple in design. And I'll highlight a couple of those. Next slide, please. So this slide shows kind of the distribution of completed water projects in 2021 and so far in 2022. You'll see that in total, 19 construction projects have been completed for a total value of approximately $26 million. Pretty even distribution across sewer, water, and regional funds. So you'll see that local water, 3 sewer and water projects were completed for about $6.7 million. 6 water projects, 2 sewer-only projects, and 8 regional projects. And I'll highlight a few of those next. Next slide, please. One big project that got completed was the Llano Trunk and Bloomberg Siphon lining project. So this project lined 3 of the siphon barrels at the Bloomberg Siphon, ended up abandoning the smallest barrel, and repaired the structures at each end of the siphon. As you can see in the photo on the left, the before condition of one of the siphon barrels was very poor. There was severe corrosion from hydrogen sulfide, which resulted in exposed aggregate and rebar. And you can see the pipe gaskets, rubber pipe gaskets actually hanging down into the barrel there in that picture. We were able to successfully complete lining of all the 3 remaining barrels before collapse occurred. The picture on the right shows there the completed condition of the pipe. So you've got a lined pipe with a nice smooth pipe wall material that is now resistant to hydrogen sulfide corrosion. This project also lined about 3,800 feet of concrete pipe with that Llano Trunk just downstream of the West College storage facility. It was also in poor condition, and this project is part of a larger program to rehabilitate the Llano Trunk. Estimated cost of this project is about $5.5 million. Next slide, please. Another project we wanted to highlight was the northerly slope protection of the Delta Pond of the Laguna treatment plant. This project was initiated because there was severe wave action from wind and storm events that was causing erosion on the northerly slope of the pond. And so this project consisted of rehabilitating approximately 1 mile of pond embankment. Also included the installation of a cofferdam in order to allow for construction to occur. A little bit about the rehabilitation method. So excavation and compaction of about 2.5 feet of embankment and slope was done, and about 1 foot of rock riprap was placed over geotextile, one to secure the bank against future wind erosion events, and also to protect against vegetation establishment. This project, the construction cost of this project was about $3.5 million. Next slide, please. So this project, Sky Farm A Enhancement Court Lift Station Reconstruction, was initiated as a result of the 2017 Tubbs fire. So the fire completely destroyed most of the above ground infrastructure at both of these lift stations. I'll note the Enhancement Court Lift Station is mainly underground, but everything above ground was destroyed and subsequently replaced with this project. So reconstructing 2 critical lift stations, again, in the Sky Farm and Fountain Grove areas. Sky Farm A, completely new building was constructed, along with all new electrical and pumping equipment. Both sites received new diesel generators. That's a trend that we are moving to throughout the city for our water facilities and backup power, diesel fuel. And on Hansford Court, the wet well is actually expanded to allow for additional pumping, and regrading and repaving of both sites was also done. That project was completed last month for a cost of $3.5 million. Next slide, please. So while we completed 19 projects in 2021 and 2022 so far, there are a lot of projects in the works right now. So we've got about 32 projects in various stages of construction and or design, 10 sewer and water projects, 6 water projects, 6 sewer only projects, and 10 regional projects, all with a total value of about $177 million. I'll note the asterisk there next to the total dollar amount. Those include the cost for the UV project. So even without the UV project, which is accounts for about $74 million, we have about $103 million of projects in the local water, local sewer, and regional funds that are in the works. Of that $103 million, approximately 25 is currently in construction. The remaining $78 million is in design, with approximately $35 million of that expected to go out to bid this year. So a lot of stuff is in the works. What this kind of highlights compared to projects completed in 2021 and 2022 is that Capital Projects has been working hard on a lot of design, and we can expect to move a lot of these projects into construction the remainder of 2022 and hopefully 2023. And I'll go ahead and highlight a few of these projects. Next slide, please. So North Trunk Sewer Replacement, we're all familiar with this project. About 2,200 feet, excuse the typo there, 2,200 feet of sewer trunk and 3,640 feet of sewer collector main are replaced with this project. 1,900 feet of water main was also added along the way. The expected cost of this project right now is $12.4 million. I will note that this project did include a bore and jack section of sewer main under Pollen Creek. Bore and jack's a trenchless method of installing sewer pipe at a depth of 35 feet. So that was a pretty big feat for this project, especially along Chenate Road, where there's a lot of traffic, and so that was a big win for this department and for Team 1 Capital Projects. We expect this project to be completed later in 2022. Next slide, please. Another project highlight we're all familiar with, myself included, the Laguna Treatment Plant Disinfection Project. The project is currently in the final stages of solidifying the contract, and expect that we will start construction in late May, early June. Sorry, that should say June. As previously mentioned, the construction cost is estimated at $68 million, and we're targeting project completion by January of 2025. Next slide, please. Another big project for the water department is the backup generators at water and wastewater facilities. The 2017 Tubbs fire taught us a valuable lesson about fuel storage and the ability to get fuel for our backup generators at sites around the city during emergency events, specifically fires. So this project will replace generators at 18 sites around the city. The natural gas and propane generators will be replaced with diesel generators. We did apply for FEMA funding under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and did get awarded federal funding in 2019 to do this project. Capital Projects has been working hard this year to finalize the bid set and the purchase agreement for the generators. and we expect to issue this project for bid later this year. Right now, the approximate estimate of the project is $9.5 million. Next slide, please. Another project highlights, project that's been in the works for a while, the Los Alamos trunk replacement, phase 1. This project is going to realign and upsize approximately 5,400 feet of sewer trunk. Excuse me. This section of trunk was identified in the 2014 master plan as one of the highest priority sewer trunks for capacity upgrade. The realignment will also allow for easier access for our maintenance crews for performing regular maintenance and repairs if necessary. This project is nearing the end of design, and right-of-way easement acquisition is expected to go to bid in late 2022 with an estimated cost of $6.4 million. Next slide, please. That's my update for you today, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any board member questions or comments? Board member Wright?
Thank you for the report. Just one technical thing. Looking at the Los Alamos trunk line, is the green line the new aligned, the new alignment? I see that going underneath buildings and all kinds of stuff, or is that where it is now and you're going to move it out?
This map does represent the existing location of the trunk. Yeah, and so it is going to be realigned. I do know that there are locations where we're still looking to acquire easements behind properties. Storage Pro is one of those big properties where we've done some work ahead of time to realign the sewers. So this does represent the current existing location of the sewer.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it's a tough project. Secondly, at your last presentation, you discussed possibly how to move forward and get more projects out, and possibly using a consultant team, and the difficulties of hiring staff and all these things that are dragging us down. Can you comment on that?
That might not have been my presentation, but I do know that we are looking to begin working with a consultant project manager who will look to take on projects that need to get done, projects that have been stalled out due to reduced staff capacity here in capital projects. So some of those ideas are in the works, perhaps a little more innovative than are typical, but with our limited staff and difficulty we're having in acquiring new staff, we are looking at some different ways to essentially get projects executed and out to construction.
So it's still in the works. There's nothing really marching. There's no, you're not working, you don't have, you're just working on it, I guess, working on the solution.
I believe we received proposals.
Oh, you have?
I believe that, I don't know who has been selected by the committee. So there aren't any projects currently in the works using that delivery method of a consultant.
But you do it, okay. All
Chair
right.
Galvin, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Director Burke.
Thank you, Board Member Wright. Yes, we have put out an RFP. We have received a number of proposals. I believe they've been shortlisted and interviews are forthcoming. So we will be selecting someone very soon, and potentially that might come to the board depending upon the award amount. And Assistant City Manager Nutt may have more to add.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. The update on that is I believe we're actually looking to award 3 different firms to provide contract management oversight with, as for staff augmentation, I believe those negotiations are near completion, and we're hoping to have those contracts in place very soon. But I believe there are 3 firms that we're looking at issuing staff augmentation contracts to. All will be working almost exclusively on water-oriented projects.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we'll open it up for public comments on item 5.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Hold on, just 1 second, Mr. Harder. Do we have anybody?
We have no other public comments other than Mr. Harder.
Thank you. Then we'll open it up for in-person comments. Mr. Harder, go ahead.
My name is Bob Harder. I live at 9327 Lakewood Drive, Windsor. I'm the former Deputy Director of Engineering for the Water Department. Two things. One, I want to compliment staff on a super thorough and educational presentation. So I commend all those who worked on it and Jason for his presentation. Second, last week I made comments under public comments to the City Council regarding water, local water and local wastewater only, not regional, CIP, and have a copy of my comments and the material I submitted to them that I want to give to you so you'll have the same information. Thank you.
Thank you. If you can give that to Secretary Atha, that'd be great. Any other board member questions or comments? All right, that'll take care of item 5.1. We'll move to item 5.2. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 5.2 is our water supply update, and Peter Martin, Deputy Director, Water Resources, will be making the presentation.
Great, thank you for that introduction. Peter Martin, Deputy Director, Water Resources. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. I have a brief water supply update for you today. If we go to the next slide. Just going to go through some quick statistics on Sonoma Water's reservoir storage today. As of today, current storage in Lake Mendocino is 48,320 acre feet, or about 55.4% of their target water supply for this time of year. That represents about a 7-day change of 253 acre feet. While you do see that black line there steadily kind of increasing at a very slow pace, I do want to note that this week PG&E formally filed a variance regarding their FERC regulated flow requirements and how much water would go into the east fork of the Russian River, the Upper Russian River. And as a result of that request by PG&E, it's very likely, and we've been kind of warned by this, by Sonoma Water, that this would be coming. They will see significant reductions of inflow into Lake Mendocino before the end of the month. So expect that line to start to trend downward as a result of reduced inflow and maintaining outflow of those reservoirs. Next slide. In terms of storage in Lake Sonoma, as of today, storage is about 141,455 acre feet, or about 57.7% of water supply capacity for Lake Sonoma. And that represents about a 780 acre foot reduction in storage over the last 7 days. So it is slowly trending down, but comparatively to last year, the channel losses are reduced. So we did hear at the last TAC meeting that Sonoma Water believes that by the beginning of June, that black line will cross over to where storage was at this time last year, represented by that sort of earth tone green line that you see on this graphic. So again, critically low storage levels in Lake Sonoma, and the water supply outlook has not changed much from where we were this time last year. So again, we're just out there asking folks to continue to conserve as much water as possible so we can get through the remainder of this dry season. Next slide. So in terms of conservation, in April of last month, Santa Rosa residents reduced their water use by 2% when compared to 2020. This is not the reductions that we had hoped for, obviously, and are falling well short of our target of 20% water use reductions. And so due to this, from our cumulative perspective of July through April of 2022, water use has slipped below that 20% cumulative target to 19% when comparing those months to 2020. So I'll talk a little bit in my next slide about how we tend to achieve those conservation targets in the next few months. We go to the next slide. So I just want to highlight that we know that Sonoma Water is going to be filing a temporary sea change petition with the State Water Resources Control Board very soon. And that's going to include a voluntary 20% reduction in Russian River diversions from July through October of 2022. And so we anticipate very much so that we will remain in stage 3 of the water shortage contingency plan for the foreseeable future. That water shortage stage was implemented in July of 2021, and it's very likely that with that, we could see allocations of water beginning in July from Sonoma Water again. So that is being kind of discussed amongst all the members and the contractors at this time, and we will come back to the board later with an update on that. In the meantime, we are refreshing messaging, putting out new materials and getting out in the community and providing them with more resources this summer to continue to save water. And it's working. We're continuing to see increased participation in programs and interest from the public. So we know that the response and what we're putting out there is getting the attention of folks in the community. But I do want to point out some underlying statistics that may be of interest to this board is that it really has been an abnormally dry start to this year. From January through April of this year, rainfall was 46% less than 2020. And then the net evapotranspiration was 25% higher than in 2020. So something to consider is that we did get quite a bit of rain early in the year, and then it just, the hose shut off for the first few months of the year and resulted in a lot less rainfall in those months that we typically can count on a lot of rainfall coming in. Next slide. I do want to highlight some of the upcoming events and workshops that we'll be attending and participating in staffing. The Wildfire Ready Resource Fair that's being hosted by the city at Old Courthouse Square this weekend from 10 to 2. We'll be there with the hydration station, and the water use efficiency staff will also staff a booth there. You can go and find information about that at srcity.org/wildfire ready resource fair. And then the North Coast chapter of the California Landscape Contractors Association will be hosting their Supplier Night Expo and has invited water use efficiency staff to talk about our Water Smart outdoor programs and resources that are available. And that will be occurring at the Petaluma Community Center on May 24th. And you can see information about that at clcancc.org/events. And then we'll be tagging along at the Napa Sonoma Junior League Rider Rig event. Some of our operations staff will be showing off some of our equipment to the kids and providing demonstrations. And so we'll be there tagging along, providing other drought resources for the community as well. And then we'll be at multiple Santa Rosa Community Farmers Market events this summer, including one coming up in June at the Farmers Market on Farmers Lane. And then just stay tuned for information about the Water Smart Expo, which is also going to occur at Old Courthouse Square on June 29th from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. And you can find more information about that at savingwaterpartnership.org/events. Go to the last slide here. So for all Water Smart resources, you can visit srcity.org/watersmart. And for latest drought updates, visit srcity.org/savewater. I can answer any questions you may have at this point.
Thank you, Deputy Director Martin. Any questions from the board? Board Member Wright?
So I think the temporary urgency change petition says that all contractors together have to save the 20%. Is that right? And if that's the case, how are we doing as a region, the contractors and Marin Municipal?
So in terms of the last technical advisory committee, we still continue to see region-wide savings above that target, through cumulatively. But in terms of their target ranges, they are focused mainly on the terms of the temporary change petition. If you'll recall, they lifted curtailments last winter after those successive atmospheric rivers. That allowed them to take advantage of high water flows in the river, and so some additional water was sent to contractors where they could take it. And so that does change the math a little bit in terms of overall conservation for that period too as well. But yes, they will look to all the contractors to set the tone. And it's very likely that we could see some allocation methodology being brought back as a result of that. And that is something that is going to be taken up by the TAC and WAC here in the upcoming months.
Thank you.
Any other board member questions or comments? If not, we'll open it up for public comment on item 5.2. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
We have no public comments.
And seeing no one rise here in the chambers, we will conclude item 5.2. We'll move now to item 6, our consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar. If anybody has any questions, now is the time. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second that motion.
We have a motion by Board Member Wright, seconded by Board Member Walsh. We'll now open it up for public comment on item 6.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
We have no public comments on this item.
And I see no one rising in the chamber, so that will take care of item 6.1. If we can have a roll call vote, please. Aye.
Sorry, microphone wasn't on. Chair Galvin?
Aye.
Board Member Badenfort?
Aye.
Board Member Walsh?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. We'll now move to item 7.1, a report item. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 7.1 is issuance of a request for proposals for water supply alternatives plan. And Colin Close, our Senior Water Resources Planner, will be making the presentation.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Santa Rosa Water is interested in exploring our options to increase the city's water supplies so that we can reduce our vulnerability to climate change. As you know, it's very likely that climate change will lead to more frequent and more severe droughts. So to determine the best path forward for increasing our water supply portfolio and to consider all of those options, we are proposing to hire a consultant to conduct a study and develop a long-range plan. So today we'll present information about the proposed scope of work and timeline, and we'll ask the board to consider approving staff issuing a request for proposals for this effort. Next slide, please. We'll talk about how we conceptualize the purpose of a water supply alternatives plan. This is a new type of effort that we haven't undertaken before. We'll review our water supply and demand projections that you have seen before based on our existing supplies and what we know about demand out to 2045. We'll talk about two initial water supply goals. We do believe these goals need to be examined and ground truthed, but we do have a starting point. We'll talk about some potential sources of water supply that we think should be studied and characterized according to their feasibility. and then consider looking at portfolios of options for moving forward. So we'll go over the strategy, the scope of work, and the timeline, and then again touch base with you on our staff recommendation for issuing a request for proposal. Next slide, please. As we envision it, a water supply alternatives plan's purpose would be to enhance our long-term water supply and resiliency so that we are better positioned to adapt to climate change and reduce that vulnerability, particularly to severe water shortages, severe droughts that would cause us to have to ration water among existing customers and would cause us to have to implement that water demand offset requirement for new development. So we'd like to reduce our vulnerability to those risks. So as I said, our approach is to conduct a study and develop a plan. And some key elements would be working closely with an interdisciplinary water team from our department and engaging an external stakeholder group for their input as well. And then establishing long-term water supply goals. So we start with the initial goals, and then we would look at whether or not those are relevant, pertinent, and achievable, and finalize those. Study the feasibility of potential water supplies, develop portfolios of options. We think there's probably more than one way forward in the future, so we'd like to have options. And then prepare and finalize the plan and implement the plan going out towards 2045. Next slide. There are quite a few existing water plans. The first 4 are city plans, and the last 2 are regional. So you're fairly familiar with our urban water management plan and our water shortage contingency plan. We've talked about those with you over the last year in the terms of studying them and adopting them, making small amendments to the water shortage plan, and then talking about their implications for the water demand offset policy. So you're somewhat familiar with those 2 documents. You probably are aware we also have a groundwater master plan that enables us to sustainably manage our groundwater resources and enabled us to do some test borings and studies of our own to better understand the groundwater in our region. We also have our incremental recycled water program master plan, and in similar fashion, it allows us to study and understand and develop the resources we need to use our recycled water program effectively. Recently, the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency developed and adopted a groundwater sustainability plan for the entire Santa Rosa Plain, which extends beyond the city of Santa Rosa up to Rona Park, down to Cotati, and then east towards Sebastopol. So they have submitted that plan to the state, and there's quite a bit of information. And as that plan is being implemented, we're going to gain more information about our groundwater resources. In addition, Sonoma Water is conducting a resiliency study, and they're doing that in close collaboration with their contractors, including City of Santa Rosa. So there's going to be a wealth of information and project ideas and potential ways to collaborate with Sonoma Water as we move forward. But none of these studies specifically answers the question that we're posing, which is, what does Santa Rosa need to own and operate as water production facilities in order to reduce our risks for severe shortages in the future? Next slide. So you probably recall that our current water supply includes water from Sonoma Water, from our city wells, and then a small amount of water from our regional recycled water systems for urban landscape. And the total is 31,540 acre feet in normal water supply use. That's average rainfall or even slightly below average rainfall. You probably recall we don't use nearly this much water, but this is the amount of water that we currently have in our portfolio, again, for normal and slightly below average rainfall. Next slide. So this slide compares that water supply, those are the light blue bars in 5-year increments, to our projected demand for water, the ordinary amount of water we expect our community is going to need as it grows over the next 20 years. And as you can see, in normal water years, average rainfall years, and even below average rainfall years, even looking out to 2045 with population growth and more dense housing, more businesses and parks and schools, we still anticipate that we will have more than enough water in our normal water years. So that's very good news. Next slide. However, you're also familiar with the fact that climate change is here, and we are seeing just in this last 2 or 3 years, the second driest period on our record for this area. So the impacts on Lake Sonoma are quite visible. The orange line shows the monthly amount of water on average over the last 30 years that's been stored in Lake Sonoma. And just a reminder for members of the public who may be watching, Lake Sonoma is operated by Sonoma Water for water supply and by the Army Corps of Engineers for flood control. So the water supply over the last 30 years on an average is that orange line. The dotted black line is the lowest month storage in that period of time. The blue line is the actual storage from October of 2019. And the red dashed line is that 100,000 acre foot mark, which can trigger, if lake storage goes below that, it can trigger a requirement that Sonoma Water reduce deliveries by 30% or more. So we know that this is of critical importance to us that we look at how to increase our reliability and resiliency, because this certainly won't be the last time that we see ourselves in a situation like this. Next slide. So if we look out to the future and we look at what impact would be if our water supply was 30% less than the ordinary demand of our community, you can see the water supply in normal years are the blue bars. The 30% below ordinary demand are the gray bars. The darker blue dash would be what we are projecting as that ordinary demand. And then the difference between the ordinary demand and the amount of supply in 2045, a 30% shortage is 7,529 acre feet. So this is part and parcel for the first goal that we would set for the work before us and looking at increasing our resiliency. How do we mitigate the risk of a 30% shortage that would have such a significant impact on our community? Next slide. The second goal is related to addressing the peak demand during our hottest summer months. Sonoma Water and the water contractors all signed a restructured agreement for water supply in 2008. And that lays out how much water we're entitled to and what happens during water shortages and a number of other clauses. In addition, it has an aspirational section. Section 1.15 calls for local water providers to develop local production capacity to meet some of their supply during those hottest peak demand months. And so what they note in this section is that to mitigate against water shortages, for whatever reason those shortages might occur, it's highly desirable that each of the water contractors has the ability to produce up to 40% of their average peak day demand during those hot summer months. So this is the second piece of an aspirational goal that we think is going to be important as we move forward with a study and a plan. Next slide. So where are we today? Our existing local supply capacity with supplies that we own and operate include 2 potable wells for drinking water and recycled water for urban landscape. So when we look at the 5-year average capacity, we see about 1,382 acre feet a year from our wells and our recycled water supply for about 34 connections for landscaping. So that's about 7.8% of our annual demand. Most of that is well water. So about 7% of that is the wells, and the 0.8% is the recycled water. So our existing local capacity, we can almost provide 8% of our local demand. On our peak summer days, we're serving our community about 2.75 million gallons per day from our own locally owned and operated water wells and recycled water supply. That's about 12.5% of an average peak day. So you can see there's quite a difference between those goals that I initially mentioned and where we are today. Next slide. So for those goals, as I mentioned in the beginning, these goals need to be ground truths. So we think that part of the study needs to consider these goals. Are they the right goals? Are they relevant? Are they reasonable? Are they the right magnitude? But the key drivers for both of those goals, one is to reduce our risk to severe shortage, and the other is to respond to that restructured agreement and be able to provide some water for our own community during those hot peak summer days as we look out towards 2045. So we recommend starting with those initial goals of achieving the capacity to locally produce 30% of our annual demand with locally owned and operated supply. That would be about 7,500 acre feet of water per year. And about 40% ability to produce about 40% of our average peak day in 2045. That'd be about 13 million gallons per day. Next slide, please. How would we get there? Well, we think that there are any number of water supply sources and strategies that could be considered. So we would recommend that at the outset of the study, we start with this list and then expand it as needed. We would look at aquifer storage and recovery. That's when we take water and inject it underground for storage for use later. It could be desalination. Normally that would not be considered a reasonable water source to consider, but as we're looking out to 2045, there's no reason we wouldn't want to look at what the cost and benefits of a potential desalination plant might be somewhere down the road for our community. Groundwater, we're very familiar with groundwater. We have groundwater resources. We've studied them. We know a lot about them. We may be wanting to look at strategic locations for increasing our groundwater supply. We could look at interties with other local water providers to see where there may be times when we have excess water or they have excess water, and it would make sense for those interties. We also want to consider potable reuse of our recycled water. This would affect many folks, potentially calpine, agricultural users, urban users. So again, when we talk about needing a stakeholder group, this is one of the driving factors for that. We want to make sure that those key stakeholders are included in this study. But we do think we need to look at potable reuse, whether there is some benefit to using that water for drinking water and under what circumstances and what volume. Just the questions are out there and need to be answered. Stormwater is another potential resource, as well as surface water. We own Lake Ralphine, and we have water rights to Santa Rosa Creek in a couple of locations and water rights to Laguna. So we need to look at all of those and see whether there are any potential water supply sources for us to use for potable uses there. We could also consider water trading. That in some ways can be a legal sort of arrangement that needs to be studied. In addition, as I mentioned before, Sonoma Water and the contractors are working on a resiliency study, so there may be a collaborative opportunity to work in cooperation with Sonoma Water and other contractors to see how we might work together to solve our regional water supply source concerns. Next slide, please. I won't read through all of the evaluation criteria, but we've come up with 15 so far. We think each of these water supply sources and strategies needs to be analyzed with these kinds of criteria in mind. Part of the study would be looking at this list and asking our interdisciplinary water team and our stakeholder group and a consultant to help us decide whether or not we should add additional criteria, whether any criteria could be eliminated or combined. But essentially, we do want to do a thorough job of analyzing the feasibility and the characteristics of each of those water supply sources so that we can better understand what might make most sense for Santa Rosa. Next slide, please. So the proposed strategy would be to study the goals, the water supplies, characterize the water supplies, look at the feasibility of them, and then develop portfolios of options that could help us achieve those goals by 2045 and draft a plan and seek input from the water staff and from our stakeholder group and revise that. We would finalize the plan first, bringing it to the BPU for a study session for BPU input and also for broad public input, revise it as needed and finalize the plan, and then move forward with implementation. There are a number of ways that we could fund this. Certainly grants are an opportunity. Having a comprehensive plan in place will help us be very competitive for grants. In addition, we have our regular annual capital project budget that we can look at funding smaller projects in a short period of time or larger projects over a longer period of time. So we would look at our funding strategy and then move forward to achieve those goals. Next slide. timeline that we're proposing is, should the board today be comfortable with staff issuing a request for proposals, we would solicit those proposals, select a firm, and bring to the BPU consideration of contract award. We have seen similar projects this year in our region ranging from $250,000 to $400,000, and we have budgeted accordingly. There's about a 6-month period where we think the core study would take place, working with the water team, the stakeholders, establishing the goals, and conducting the feasibility study for water supplies, developing draft portfolios and an action plan. And then a couple of months where we would bring that plan to the BPU for a study session, revise it as needed, and finalize the plan, and then begin to implement that plan after that has taken place. Next slide, please. On April 28th, staff brought this concept to the City Council BPU Liaison Committee and asked them if they would approve a path forward that's laid out here on this slide. Having staff solicit proposals, selecting a firm, having the BPU award the contract, engaging the firm in the study and drafting the plan, having a study session, finalizing the plan, and then staff executing that plan. That committee unanimously approved that path forward for staff, and so we are here today with presenting this information to you. Next slide, please. So with that, it is recommended by the City Council Board of Public Utilities Liaison Committee and Santa Rosa Water that the Board of Public Utilities by motion approve the issuance of a request for proposals to solicit proposals from qualified consultants to complete a study of potential water supply sources and develop a water supply alternatives plan for increasing the city's water supply resiliency and reliability. Next slide. With that, we're happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Close. We'll open it up now for any board member questions or comments. Board member Wright.
Yeah, no question, but just a comment. I support this study. I don't believe that we're going to find a silver bullet that's going to give us 790,000 acre feet or whatever it was, the amount of water we need. But I'm reminded of our studies that went on forever at the Geysers, and nobody ever dreamed that we'd build a pipeline to the Geysers to get rid of our wastewater. So it's amazing what crazy things come out of these efforts. So I do support this and getting this thing going. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Wright. Any other board member questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion based on the recommendation we just received.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the Board of Public Utilities by motion approve the issuance of a request for proposals to solicit proposals from qualified consultants to complete a study of potential water supply sources and develop a water supply alternatives plan for increasing the city's water supply resiliency and reliability.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Board Member Wall, seconded by Board Member Badenfort. At this time, I'll open it up for public comments on item 7.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Ethan?
We have no voicemail or email public comments.
Okay, I see Mr. Harder. Did you wish to speak on this item?
Yes, sir. Bob Harder, 9327 Lakewood Drive. Wow, it's the most thorough, informative report I've ever gone to on water supply. And I was in the Corps, but that's not really a good excuse. This was fabulous. It brought to mind three things to me. One, the public is a stakeholder, but many have crazy ideas, and some of which are very good. So I would encourage, and I don't know, they might already be planning to do this, but I would encourage you to have 1 or 2 public meetings specifically for the public to present their ideas, good and realistic, and not so much so, because some ideas might be worthy of pursuing as a partial solution. 2, I think the rules of the general plan, et cetera, only allow plans to be officially adopted 20 years forward. But I would encourage some brainstorming about what about 100 years from now? We have a limited situation. I came here 45 years ago to help build Warm Springs Dam. We thought, here you go, have your water, and then we're back needing more water. It's not empty, but you see what I mean. We need the far vision. And the third point is, there's some other meetings going around the county on the same subject, and even though everyone agrees, it would be good to do it collaboratively. There is a concern that somebody doesn't want to be left out and are pursuing more individually focused needs. So I would just encourage everybody to keep their radar out for who else might be dibbing water. As somebody said, maybe Ben Franklin, when the well runs dry, we know the worth of water, and we're kind of there. So I applaud the city for taking this effort with radar out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harder.
Chair Galvin, I'm sorry, I did miss one public comment, a hand raised in Zoom.
Okay.
Tracy R., you've been allowed to speak. You can go ahead and unmute and make your public comment.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm a resident of Santa Rosa, and I had a question about the reclaimed water that was mentioned in one of the options, the purple pipe that we see sometimes in urban areas. I was wondering, in both the graphs, it looked like the reclaimed water wasn't going to be increased much in any of the plans unless I misread it. Is there a possibility that reclaimed water could be used more, especially in public areas that would control wildfire spread, not just on golf courses or immediate landscaping areas, but more throughout the city for public use to control fire danger? Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, Tracy. Director Burke, did you want to respond?
Sure, I'm happy to respond to that question. Thank you for that question. We do reuse 100% of our recycled water on most years already, so it is allocated to all of our customers. We are also have a very limited purple pipe network, as is said, in the city of Santa Rosa. And so right now we're looking at all of our alternatives and what might be most cost effective to either expand the network or to look at other options, as Mr. Close mentioned, such as the potential for potable reuse. So we'll be looking at all of our options for recycled water going forward.
Thank you. I believe that concludes all the public comments. So at this time, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Galvin?
Aye.
Board Member Badenfort?
Aye.
Board Member Walsh?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. That will conclude item 7.1. We'll now move to item 7.2. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 7.2, is a direction to Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency board member regarding adoption of groundwater sustainability user fees. And Peter Martin, our Deputy Director of Water Resources, will be making the presentation.
Great. Good afternoon again, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Thank you again for the opportunity to bring this item before you. I know you've been briefed most recently when this fee study began a few months back. If we could go to the second slide. First, I just want to quickly reintroduce this board as to what the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is being asked to do as a result of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, often called SGMA. SGMA really ultimately requires that local agencies with authorities manage their groundwater resources in a sustainable manner on a 20-year planning horizon, 20 to 50-year planning horizon. First, it required local agencies to form what are called groundwater sustainability agencies, or GSAs. And those were required in all high and medium priority designated groundwater basins. That designation is made by the California Department of Water Resources in their what's termed the Bulletin 118. It's a report that's updated on a frequent basis. So as a result, Santa Rosa Water and other agencies in the region with jurisdictional boundaries in that basin formed a joint powers authority to act as a GSA for the Santa Rosa Plain groundwater subbasin, which is known as the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So the legislation required comprehensive groundwater sustainability plans be created in a transparent public process and impose specific timelines for the adoption of these plans. Critically overdrafted basins were due in January of 2020. And for the remaining high and medium priority basins, that was January 2022. The Santa Rosa Plain groundwater subbasin is a medium priority basin. Therefore, a plan was developed over the last few years in a very public process. This board supported the adoption of that plan, and it was submitted to the state in January of this year. So finally, in that bullet at the end, which I've underlined, groundwater sustainability plans also include measurable objectives and milestones that have to be put forward and implemented in 5-year increments to achieve what they term sustainability within 20 years of that adoption of that plan. Next slide. So there are an estimated 7,000 wells in the basin, and those include rural, domestic, mutual water companies, agricultural, and municipal supplies. As you can see from that pie chart on the right, they are mostly rural domestic wells by numbers, and also by demand as well. So, the largest sectors in terms of demand are small domestic wells, and then agricultural users, with the remainder coming from municipal water companies and municipalities, water companies like our own, municipal supplies. So, next slide. So, I think, as I mentioned, the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency spent the last few years developing a groundwater sustainability plan. In 2019, that board of directors did adopt a fee of $19.90 per acre foot of groundwater pumped annually. That fee, the amount was specific to being able to sustain the GSA for 3 years through the period for where they were developing that groundwater sustainability plan. That fee is assessed on all groundwater users in the basin, and rural homeowners are assessed a flat fee of $9.95. But if you'll recollect, Sonoma County and Sonoma Water covered costs for private wells. Those include agricultural and domestic well users for the past few years. The municipal users did contribute to their pumping costs to support the plan and the budget necessary during these 3 years. This fee and the structure remains in place today. Next slide. If we go to slide 5, actually. Thank you. At the beginning of this year, I did update this board that the 3 basins within the county did seek professional services to complete a rate and fee study and determine what will be necessary to support the implementation of the groundwater sustainability plans over the next 5 years. The consultant selected to complete the studies was SCI Consulting Group with Larry Walker and Associates acting as a technical sub-consultant. And then just as a reminder, that existing rate that I spoke of earlier for $19.90 per acre foot of water extracted remains in effect. But they did take a look at and evaluated what a forecasted budget would look like over the 5 years and multiple fee options that would be necessary to sustain the implementation needs for the next 5 years as part of their work. And so that fee study is being finalized and is almost complete. And I'll talk a little bit about the timeline for that. Next slide. So over the past few months, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency has been very busy with community meetings, advisory committee, which staff from Santa Rosa Water do participate in, and then other sort of liaisons throughout the subcommittee of specific folks that have certain well uses and technical expertise. In April, there was a board meeting to sort of finalize a fee concept and start to think about what that fee structure looks like. And then an additional board meeting occurred early this month, and they provided further direction. So at that April meeting, the board did suggest that the consultants should continue to keep that existing rate structure in place, but revisit the actual amount necessary to sustain the fees in the basin. So they winnowed down on one fee. And then they proposed to have a public hearing on that fee in June and adopt it before the necessary timelines to get it into the deadline for it to be on people's tax bills. Next slide. I do want to point out that the consultant did look at multiple sources of funding, and those being the member agencies of the Joint Powers Authority, opportunities for grants, looked at all the groundwater users and beneficiaries of groundwater, and those included private well owners, public water systems, and other water users. And then they also looked at options that could provide fee structures for any combination of these three. Next slide. So one of the pieces of importance was developing what is necessary in terms of a budget to complete implementation over the next 5 years. The board and the fee, based upon the recommendation of the consultant, settled on a budget of $1,074,000 on an average annual basis. These cover a lot of the operating costs for the work of the GSA over this time and to meet the requirements and what they've laid out in the groundwater sustainability plan that needs to be taken care of for the next 5 years. And so you can see from here, this is just a breakdown of the various activities that are planned, with those fluctuating somewhat depending upon the year and the projects being undertaken. Next slide. So again, I think I got a little ahead of myself on one of the earlier slides, but I did want to just talk a little bit about, since the last time I've been before this board, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board of Directors did meet in April and gave direction to the rate and fee consultant to, one, retain the existing rate structure. That is a groundwater user fee based upon acre foot of water pumped annually. They did not support an individual fee on individual wellheads, a parcel tax, or a benefit assessment. The last two being incredibly difficult to put into place and perhaps costly, and may actually have very little chance of success given the appetite for additional parcel taxes these days. And further, the timeline to get those into place would perhaps put the GSA behind schedule and being able to implement anything. So the board also gave direction to assume 25% of the 5-year budget could be met with grants. A significant portion of Proposition 68 funding was set aside for the implementation of groundwater sustainability plans. The funding will be competitive, but it is very likely that this Groundwater Sustainability Agency could see a significant amount of grants being awarded to the basin to go forward in the future over the next 5 years. And so it could exceed that 25%, but the board was cautiously optimistic and conservative in how they viewed looking forward and the appropriateness of assuming grants could be utilized or could be awarded. And so the idea was they wanted them to complete the fee study and the analysis in order for it to be implemented by June of this year and make it onto the next year's tax rolls. Next slide. So here's just a real initial draft fee that's, well, it's getting closer. I shouldn't say it's initial, but it is a draft fee that's under consideration right now of $38.28 per acre foot of groundwater pumped annually. This would be equivalent to $19 to $20 per year for a rural homeowner under the assumption that rural domestic well users use about a half of acre foot annually on average. It's just sort of the simple calculation of that. The remainder of the budget on an annual basis, minus the assumption for grants, divided by the total pumping in the basin, gives you that fee structure. I do want to note that this is a draft fee that's being considered. It is still not final. The fee study has not been fully completed. It could fluctuate a bit, but we've been told very clearly it will not exceed $40 per acre foot. Next slide. So in terms of just the fiscal impacts for Santa Rosa Water, which should be considered, based upon this historical fee in anticipation of 1,600 acre feet being utilized annually. The city has been contributing over the last few years $31,800 per year on average. And if we were to consider 5 years going forward, based upon the new initial fee that is being proposed, that would increase of about $30,000 per year, and would have to be incorporated into the city's budget, or excuse me, the Santa Rosa Water's budget going forward. We did make an assumption that the fees will increase in the proposed budget for next year, so that has been incorporated in our forecast for next year. Next slide. Really, it just really comes down to a lot of work has been done over the last few months, and it required a significant amount of effort on behalf of the rate consultant, and then myself and Mr. Colin Close have also attended several public meetings and supported the technical staff of the GSA over the past few months. The GSA board has hosted 4 community meetings. These meetings were publicly noticed and advertised to discuss the rate and fee study approach and the proposed revised fee. 2 of those meetings were hosted virtually and 2 were in-person meetings, one occurring in the town of Windsor and one occurring in the city of Santa Rosa. In those 4 meetings, they collectively logged close to 300 questions and comments that were ultimately responded to the public, and many of those are available online on the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency website. So therefore, the Santa Rosa Plain GSA board will consider adoption of a revised fee amount at a public hearing on June 9th of this year. That is the next step. So they've concluded their outreach, and they will likely pursue a revised fee adoption at that time. So that leads us to the recommendation being asked of this board today. Let's go to the next slide. So it's recommended by Santa Rosa Water staff that the Board of Public Utilities consider the revised groundwater sustainability user fee for the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and by motion recommend that Santa Rosa's GSA board member, that being Councilmember Schwedhelm, support adoption of the revised fee at the Santa Rosa Plain GSA board meeting, June 9th public hearing. That concludes my presentation. Go to the last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Deputy Director Martin.
Chair Galvin?
Yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt. I just realized that there was a slight typo in that recommendation, and it might be also on the board packet. This recommendation is for the board to recommend to the council that the council direct the board's, the GSA board member support the rate, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Okay. With that, thank you again, Deputy Director Martin. I think there's been a tremendous amount of work gone into not only setting up this agency, but now dealing with the whole fee structure. And I'm satisfied that all the due diligence has been done, and I support the recommendation that is being made to this full board. I'll open it up for any other board member questions or comments. Seeing none, then I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I will move that the BPU by motion recommend that the City of Santa Rosa City Council support the City of Santa Rosa, that they recommend to the City of Santa Rosa Council that the Santa Rosa's GSA board members support adoption of the revised fee at the SRP GSA June 9th, 2022 public hearing. Sorry about that. It's getting a little confused.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion by Board Member Wright, seconded by Board Member Watts, to recommend that the City Council recommend and direct the representative to the GSA to support adoption of the revised fee schedule. At this time, we'll open it up for public comments on item number 7.2. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
I see no public comments.
No public comments, and there's no one here in the council chambers, so we have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Galvin?
Aye.
Board Member Badenford?
Aye.
Board Member Walsh?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Very good. That'll conclude item 7.2. We'll move to item 8, which is public comments on non-agenda matters. We'll open it up for public comments on item 8. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
We have no public comments.
That will conclude item number 8. We have no referrals. We have no written communications. I don't believe we have any subcommittee reports. Do we have any board member reports? Board Member Wright?
I was going to report this last time, but my dog was barking so much I didn't want to disrupt the meeting. But on May 1st, I attended the first in-person WAC-TAC meeting, which was fun for me because I saw a lot of people I hadn't seen in a long time and heard a lot of good technical things. But of major interest, the chair to the TAC, Drew McIntyre, retired, and our Director Burke was appointed to take his position. So Director Burke is now chair of the TAC. So in my memory, I think the last time the City of Santa Rosa held the chair of the TAC was in 2006 when Miles Ferris held the position. But more importantly, Director Burke has broken the glass ceiling. I think this is the first time a woman has ever become chair of the TAC, and I think we need to give Director Burke a shout out for that. So that is my report. Thank you.
Congratulations to Director Burke. Thank you for your comments, Board Member Wright. We appreciate it. Are there any other board member reports? Seeing none, we will take public comments on item 12. If If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
There are no public comments.
Very good. We'll move to the director's report. Director Burke?
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board, and thank you, Board Member Wright, for those kind comments and for being at the WACTAC meeting in May. I do have a couple items to report out. First, I wanted to just give an update to the board on our Farmers Lane wells. Starting June 1st, we will start producing water from Farmers Lane to help augment our city water supply. And as the board, I think well knows, these wells are a valuable resource that are heavily relied upon to reduce the amount of water being purchased from Sonoma Water each year. During this unprecedented drought, these seasonal water supplies support the required purchase reductions that are imposed by our wholesaler, Sonoma Water. I do want to recognize all of the work that our local operations team does on these wells every year. Over the winter months, while the wells were shut down, our talented local operators completed our annual maintenance on both wells and the water treatment plant. Our local operations team has done an outstanding job maintaining and operating these wells and our water treatment facility, ensuring we achieve maximum productivity each year. And we anticipate operating the wells at peak productivity throughout the season. And again, I want to thank the operators for all of their hard work. I also wanted to give the board an update on our annual Geysers maintenance shutdown. So this Monday marked the first day of our annual maintenance shutdown. And as you may be aware, each year we perform a joint maintenance shutdown of the geyser system to undertake preventative maintenance work that cannot be accomplished while the system is online. We work closely with Calpine to ensure that the shutdown is done in a manner that minimizes impacts to both their operations as well as ours. Historically, we've generally been able to accomplish this maintenance work in a 2-week period, but we're realizing that the system is beginning to age. I think it went online in 2003, so almost 20 years old. And as the system begins to age, we are finding that more time is needed to ensure reliable operation. So this year, we will be offline for 3 weeks to perform the maintenance. We will be cleaning the Bear Canyon wet well, performing a thorough electrical inspection of the Miacamas pump station, completing a condition assessment on the terminal reservoir, exercising and ensuring proper operation of earthquake and isolation valves, replacing non-operable valves, and quite a bit more. The approximately 20-person team that will be undertaking all of this work is comprised of our highly skilled operators, electricians, mechanics, maintenance workers, and instrumentation technicians. And I want to thank the team for all of their hard work. This is a very intense period of a lot of work, and they do a phenomenal job keeping the geyser system in excellent shape. And then last, I wanted to let the board know that our Deputy Director of Regional Operations, Emma Walton, is going to be leaving the city. Today is her last day. Emma started as an Associate Civil Engineer in December of 2014 with the Transportation and Public Works Department as a member of the Capital Projects Engineering team. She was promoted in May of 2017 to the Water Department as the Water Reuse Engineer. I got to work with Emma incredibly closely through the Tubbs Fire Water Quality Task Force. Emma was one of the main members of the task force, really helping us figure out what caused the issue and figuring out a solution. She was promoted to Deputy Director of Engineering Resources, and then she also was acting director for a number of months in December of 2018, and then she eventually landed out at the treatment plant in September of 2020 as our Deputy Director of Regional Water Operations. Emma has been a trusted colleague, advisor. She's incredibly brilliant and very impressive. She has great leadership skills, and she will be going on to Sonoma Water to take over as their operations manager. So I want to congratulate Emma. She will be sorely missed. She won't be able to get away from me because I'm going to make her keep in touch with me, but it'll be great to have her as a partner in Sonoma Water and to continue to work with her. She leaves a big hole. but I wanted to let the board know that we will be having a new deputy director starting on June, I believe the 4th is that Sunday, and that would be Mike Prinz. Mike was recently returned to the city after working for Las Colinas Sanitary District. He came back as Deputy Director over Capital Projects, and he will be transferring over to take the treatment plant Deputy Director position. Mike was in that position from 2013 to 2018, so he has a lot of familiarity, and we're excited to have him join the Water Department again and taking over leadership of the treatment plant. And that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Director Burke. Obviously, we're sad to hear that Deputy Director Walton is leaving, but it sounds like she's moving to a good position, and I know we'll have a lot of interface with her over the coming years. So I'll open it up now for any board member questions or comments. All right, we will then open it up for public comments on item number 13. If you wish to make a comment regarding item 13 via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Atha?
There are no public comments.
All right, I believe that concludes our agenda for today. I would like to go ahead and adjourn this meeting in honor of Deputy Director Emma Walton, and we wish her good luck in her new position, and hopefully she will not be a stranger to us. So we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.